Good morning, everyone. Hopefully this video is looking a little bit better than usual. I've been trying to work a lot on my setup lately, and I think the videos are going to come out at least a little bit easier to watch going forward. Thank you so very much to everybody who has been giving me kind advice on how to improve the quality of my videos. I love you guys, probably a little bit more than you would be comfortable with me expressing, but thank you very much. In this one, I want to talk about video game anger and fighting game salt. It's a huge part of fighting game culture. It's one of the best parts. It's hilarious to go online and watch compilations of grown-ass men throwing tantrums like 6-year-olds. But there's obviously also a sort of palpable darkness of the whole thing, and it's especially bad if you are the person who's having to carry a lot of that anger inside of you. I think it can probably impede your health in the long run, but it will obviously also impact your progress and your performance as a player, which is why I think it's really interesting to talk about. Before we jump into it, one thing that I just want to mention, because I promised myself that I was going to say this if I ever made this video, it's something that was bugging me, is this argument that you always hear where people say, well, it's just a game. You know, when somebody gets pissed over a video game, you get told, well, it's just a game. And I always found it a little bit strange, because I get that it is just a game and a form of entertainment, but if it didn't matter enough to you that it couldn't make you angry, why would you waste maybe hours every day doing it? You know, we have content creators now who make hour-long videos that get watched by thousands, if not millions of people, and it would be a huge waste of all of our time if it didn't matter enough to us that it couldn't make us even a little bit frustrated. And if you don't care enough about your progress as a fighting game player, that it doesn't make you salty every once in a while, then maybe you should do something with your time that's matters a little bit more to you. I think most people get pissed when they play fighting games sometimes, and I think the fight is against that frustration and retaining composure, and I think that's a big part of progressing as a fighting game player, and so that's what I want to talk about in the video. Now, I started looking this up a couple of days ago, and it turns out it's the kind of thing that some pretty serious people actually do research on, and I found some really interesting and fun facts that I want to share with you guys. But before we do that, I want to self-deprecate a little bit. I think it's very important for YouTubers to self-deprecate. I certainly want to keep on doing it constantly, and so what I want to do is I want to show you my wrist right here. I don't know if it's picking up, but I have kind of like a purple little patch there on my wrist. That's a scar from a Tekken-related injury, as embarrassing as that sounds. But this is back in the day when I was still playing in Sweden, and I would sometimes get really pissed playing Tekken. I was starting out, and I'm not the kind of player who would necessarily like throw his controller or anything, but what I would do every once in a while when I got really angry was slam my fist into my desk, my table, and I was playing this person who was like taunting me and stuff, and I was losing really bad, and I went to do that, to slam my fist. And instead of hitting the top of my desk, I actually hit the sharp corner of the table, and it stabbed straight into my wrist like that. It turned all purple and shit, and it was bleeding, and it was really disgusting. But the good part, the good thing, was that I got this little scar, this little memento now, that reminds me when I get pissed when I'm playing video games that that's not something that we do anymore. It's not a good idea. And so I took that with me, and it was an important lesson, I think. But I just wanted to sort of jump in the boat with you and let you know that this is something that I think most people, and that I certainly experience if you are, a person who experiences a lot of frustration when you play fighting games. Now, when I get to this really cool research paper that I found on this, I'm going to mention the name of it in case you want to look it up. It was a really fun read, honestly, but it's a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to read off a piece of paper here. It's called Competence Impeding Electronic Games and Players' Aggressive Feelings, Thoughts, and Behaviors. And it's written by Andrew K. Przybylski, I think it's pronounced, as well as a couple of other co-authors, and they are apparently at the University of Oxford, and they're psychologists. So it's the kind of thing, like I say, that some serious people actually look at, which I thought was cool. And when you get into this paper, I think there are two main things they highlight, sort of my interpretation, obviously, that make you pissed when you play a video game, and they made me think of fighting games so much. I thought it was almost hilarious. But the first thing I want to point out that they found is that it does not matter if the video game you play is violent or angry or has violence in it. And I think if you play a lot of video games, that's probably something you already knew. But you know, the generation before us necessarily didn't necessarily know that, and there was a lot of worry about, will like violent video games make you more violent? And apparently that's not the case. It can be like a very inane video game like Tetris, but if it's frustrating in the same way Tekken can be frustrating, then it will make you angry in the same way, and in some cases will even make people violent. What it does is apparently it creates a lot of stress in you and triggers your flight or fight response. And when you have a lot of adrenaline and you're in a state of stress, it's pretty damaging to your body. And if you're sitting there for like hours playing Tekken and you're in constant stress, I mean, I'm not a medical professional, but I don't think that's good for you at all. But the big things that they bring up that make you pissed when you play video games, and listen to this and see if it reminds you of anything. First of all, feelings of helplessness because loss of control or difficult controls in the video game, which is huge. I mean, Tekken and fighting games have some of the most difficult controls of any video game that is played. And when you get comboed or destroyed by your opponent, when you're in the air being juggled, you have no control. You can press as many buttons as you want, but it's not going to change anything on the screen. You're sort of helpless. And that is, if that is something that makes people pissed, then Tekken will make you pissed, right? I mean, just moving, doing basic combos is much more difficult than anything you have to do when you play a typical video game. And if you think about something like Hearthstone, like a really popular game, all you have to do is like not click the wrong thing, and you have like a minute to do it. Whereas in Tekken, you know, you make several manipulations per second. So that's a big one. The other big thing that seems to make people angry when they play video games is when you feel that your competence or your ego is being attacked. When it makes you feel stupid, basically, or makes you feel like you're not skillful. And Tekken is a huge game of skill. It's also one-on-one, so there's no team or anything that you can blame for a loss. It's famously a very balanced video game, so while you can certainly like start making excuses like bad connection speed, or my opponent had an overpowered character or was doing cheap stuff, which is true a lot of the time, I mean, I grant you. I mean, it's certainly a case like when you lose a Tekken, it is sort of an attack on your ego and your competence a little bit, and that's probably another reason why fighting games make us uniquely frustrated when we play them. And I want to bring up something when it comes to the rank system of fighting games here. When I was at university a long time ago and we were studying organizational theory, there was this really fun idea that came up called the Peter Principle. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's really cool, so look it up if you haven't. But the Peter Principle is this fun idea that if you work in an organization like a company, eventually everybody in that company will be incompetent. And the reason for that is that if you have a job that you're really good at and that you have a lot of competence for, you're likely to get promoted. And if you're at this new high level, and if you're really good and proficient and competent in that job, you get promoted again until you get to the point where you're not super competent and you're not doing a super great job anymore. And then that's the point where you end up being stable, and it's the job you end up having in the long term. And so it's this kind of silly idea that everybody eventually becomes incompetent. But think about the ranking system we have in Tekken. You can be a very proficient and good player compared to most players in the world, but because the ranking system exists, you don't get to experience that on a match-to-match basis. If the system when you played online was that they would just give you a random opponent somewhere in the world and they didn't consider rank or experience whatsoever, then if you are a player who plays a lot, who watches YouTube videos about Tekken, who cares about Tekken, who's trying to learn Tekken, then you would probably win a vast majority of your games and you would feel very confident and very competent, but the game doesn't let you do that. It bumps you up in the ranks until you get to the point where you start losing roughly half or more of your games, because otherwise you wouldn't be at that rank, right? So you are constantly playing at a rank where your confidence and your competence as a player is being attacked. And so it's another reason an online fighting game is like a unique environment for making people really, really angry. And so I just thought this was really fun to read because it feels like a perfect storm. It just makes me think of Tekken so much. And it's no wonder, if this is the psychology behind it, that video games will make you, and fighting games will make you this angry. The last thing I want to mention about this little research thing that I read was, it's pretty dark, honestly. It's like a part of the experiment that they did, is that they would have some people play like a simple and easy video game, and they would have some people play a very frustrating video game. And then this is the way I interpret it anyway, but the next tester would come in, and the previous tester would have to decide how long that player would have to keep their hand in a bowl of really cold water, like really cold water to the point where it was seriously painful. And if you play the frustrating video game, people would have the next guy keep their hand in the painful water for an average of 10 seconds longer. So if you get pissed playing video games, you will become vindictive to the point where you will honestly try and maybe inflict some pain on other people. And I just thought that was really dark, and I think while like Rage and Salt is a lot of fun, that is probably not a nature inside ourselves that we want to encourage. And so it's a good reason to maybe rethink a couple of things if you are the kind of person who gets really, really angry a lot when you play video games. Anyway, what I want to get to now is sort of my tips and tricks for how to retain composure and not get to that point where you get really frustrated. I have 3 things I want to bring up. The first one is big. You've probably heard it before, but it's just the concept of taking breaks. But it is a really important one. And to illustrate how powerful it can be, at least in my experience, when you have a session of Tekken, the first really big loss and sort of shitty, cheap loss of the day is not the one that ends up getting you really pissed. It builds, right, and you get to a critical point, and then it wells up to the point where it would start to impede your performance and everything else. But if you take breaks before that happens, you can sort of avoid hitting that critical mass where you get angry, and it can help you sort of retain composure. It's also a good idea, I think, to just see something else and switch environments every once in a while when you're trying to focus on something. At least that helped me, when I was still a student and I had to take a lot of notes in class and stuff. But I mean, it's a lot like gambling with Tekken and with fighting games. If you start losing, you just want to play even more because you want to like erase the loss by winning, and I think that can turn into a little bit of a negative spiral. But if you really want to keep on playing the game, a good thing you can do for a break is just stop playing online, maybe go into practice mode for a little bit, lab a couple of things, spend a half an hour working on your backdash. That's never a bad idea. Or, if you don't want to keep on playing the game, maybe it's time to have a meal, go get a nice shower, have a walk. And I think it can be a really big thing. And then sometimes, like if you're on a losing streak and you're feeling shitty, maybe it's just a good idea to turn off the game for now, maybe come back tomorrow, Sleep solves a lot of problems, I think. So I think breaks is a big one, and it is like seriously, honestly powerful. It sounds very simple, but don't underestimate the power of taking occasional breaks. The next one I want to mention, this is kind of specific to Tekken, but it's being smart about taking revenge matches, and I think this is a deceptively big one, because if you're playing against somebody who beats you and you get pissed, you might want to feel like you want to prove them wrong. You want to prove that you can beat them, and so you take the revenge match in anger. And even though it might definitely be the case that you are better than that player and you could normally beat them and they are relying on cheap shit because it is that kind of a game, if you're doing it because you're angry, then you're already at the point where I think you're going to make, bad decisions. Your reaction speed is going to be worse, and so you're likely to keep on losing. And if that is a person who is like the same rank as you, you're losing so many points that it's just going to make you even more pissed, right? So, I mean, I'm pretty conservative with revenge matches, but if I feel like I'm calm, but there are a couple of small adjustments I can make to beat this guy who beat me, then I will take them. Or if it's just like a really fun game or a fun opponent, and I want to keep on playing for those reasons. But being clever about revenge matches is probably a pretty big part, deceptively a big part of being successful when you're playing in an online ranked environment. The last one I want to mention is just I want to come back to this little scar on my wrist. If you have like rules and you make a promise to yourself that I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to like rage quit, or I'm not going to make excuses or whatever, then just having a little bit of a physical anchor somewhere in the room, whether it's a spot in your body or a spot on your wall or just something, in the real world, I feel like it helps to sort of keep that in your mind and really help you stick to your principles instead of, an idea or something that is just in your head. And again, it sounds very simple, but I think it can really help. So, I mean, maybe just do something in your room, put something somewhere, and when you look at that thing, you just use that as a tool to sort of bring yourself down to composure. Because I think while you will probably get pissed when you play these games, I mean, it's just such a thankless thing because it will just make everything worse. And self-pity is just one of those emotions that it fuels itself really efficiently. And the more you sort of almost masturbate it and let it well up and think about it, the more intense and defeating it gets, and the longer it will last, and the worse you will do at the game you're trying to play. The last thing I want to say is just that I want to give you a lot of love here. I mean, I know it can be really frustrating to play these games, and I feel you, and I'm a fan of yours if you are one of the kind people who come to my channel and watch my videos. I really believe in you, and I'm rooting for you, and I think that you're going through something that everybody goes through, but I want you to hang in there, and I want you to keep on progressing, and I want you to become an even more advanced player, and I want you to stay composed, and I know that you can do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. We're heading quickly for 20,000 subscribers, which is extremely exciting for me. It's a milestone. Maybe we'll do something really special when that happens. If you have some ideas, then definitely let me know. But for now, again, thank you so much for being here. I mean, stay safe out there, and stay calm, stay collected, and you will do better. It really will impact your performance in a big way, I think. But yeah, thank you so very much, and I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye for now.